The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
They had one weekend where they had like 18 murdered and 71 shot. But they said, you know what their excuse is? Yeah, but it was a long weekend.
The war of words between President Trump and Chicago's Mayor Brandon Johnson reaches new heights. How the mayor responds to Trump's suggestion he belongs in jail.
Hundreds of thousands of aviation workers, both federal sector and private sector, ask all day long, is it safe?
The shutdown drags on and the impacts are hitting airports across the country. Just how much should you worry about the safety of flying? And then Johnson & Johnson could be out millions of dollars. Which product is being linked to a woman's death and what the company says about the ruling against them. Good evening. I'm Taylor Murray. Welcome to the National News Desk, America's News Now. President Donald Trump hosting a roundtable this afternoon of cabinet members as well as independent journalists on Antifa and the growing level of violence across the country. President Trump, in his opening statements, linked the assassination of Charlie Kirk, the sniper attack at a Dallas ICE facility, the protest of other ICE facilities in Democratic cities to demonstrations on college campuses countrywide, saying they are organized.
The epidemic of left-wing violence and Antifa-inspired terror has been escalating for nearly a decade. At universities, Antifa has organized riotous mobs to attack campus speakers. I see it all the time. And these are agitators, anarchists, and they're paid. And you'll find that out. You'll be finding it out very soon.
Meanwhile, the battle over the limits of President Trump's authority to deploy troops to more U.S. cities intensifies. As a growing number of Democratic leaders mount lawsuits and executive orders in opposition, the Trump administration is forging ahead regardless of local support levels. In Oregon, a judge put a temporary block on Guard deployment to Portland. The governor says the city is not a war zone and says the Trump administration is crossing a line.
And we need to allow the rule of law to be upheld, which says there is no insurrection, there is no rebellion here. And the president needs to stand down and we need to send these troops home.
President Trump has suggested he may invoke the Insurrection Act to sidestep any court ruling that blocks National Guard troops from being dispatched. Here's a look at Chicago, where hundreds of National Guard troops from Illinois as well as Texas are expected to arrive soon. Texas Guard members are already at an Army Reserve Center outside the city. Today, President Trump said on X, Mayor Brandon Johnson and Governor J.B. Pritzker, quote, should be in jail for failing to protect ICE officers as Illinois officials continue to oppose the deployment of troops. Now, here's how the mayor responded.
This president is unstable, unhinged, a double-minded individual that, quite frankly, is a threat to our democracy. And it's certainly not the first time that Donald Trump has called for the arresting of a black man unjustly. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to stay firm as the mayor of this amazing city.
Governor Pritzker said on X that he will not back down, claiming he and Johnson are preventing, quote, full-blown authoritarianism. A hearing in a lawsuit on the Chicago troop deployment is set for Thursday. Now to Seattle, where local leaders are preemptively putting measures in place in case the president zeroes in on the city for a federal takeover. Mayor Bruce Harrell today signing 2 executive orders that would attempt to limit the Trump administration's immigration policies and deployment of troops.
We cannot be underprepared by any stretch of the imagination at this critical moment when Trump is escalating his attacks on cities and carrying out what we believe is a cruel deportation agenda. And he's doing it with masked, ununiformed officers.
Now, the first executive order evaluates all legal options and directs local Seattle police what they should and should not do. The second executive order bans the use of face masks by law enforcement, including ICE agents, and requires they wear visible ID badges. In Memphis, Tennessee, National Guard troops could be deployed by Friday. The governor says the U.S. Marshals Service will deputize troops to play a critical support role for local law enforcement. Now, the Memphis Safe Task Force that's already on the ground has now made a total of 200 arrests, recovered 58 guns, and carried out 31 drug seizures, according to the FBI. The task force consists of the U.S. Marshals, ICE, and DHS. Taking a look at Los Angeles, where a violent Mexican mafia-linked gang is busted. Federal and local law enforcement officers arrested 14 suspected leaders of the Rancho San Pedro gang Tuesday. Now, the takedown capping a years-long investigation in what the FBI calls one of the most violent street crews in Southern California, accused of trafficking meth, fentanyl, heroin, cocaine, PCP, and guns into the Golden State. Officials believe this dismantling of the gang's leaders will affect 500 gang members spread across 6 cliques that pay taxes to Mexican mafia bosses in state prisons. Former FBI Director James Comey pleads not guilty to lying to Congress 5 years ago during his first court appearance. The vocal critic of President Trump faces 1 count of making a false statement and 1 count of obstruction of a congressional proceeding. It's in connection with his testimony before a Senate committee back in September 2020. The judge set the trial date for January 5th. President Trump has been pushing for a case against Comey, who played a key role in the 2016 Russian collusion probe. The federal government shutdown is now headed for at least a 9th day after Senate Democrats voted down again the House-passed funding resolution for a 6th time. Senate Democrats continue to tie this budget onto health care demands. Arizona Senator Mark Kelly is calling on House Speaker to bring House members back to work on health care, while Speaker Johnson says there is no business to attend to until the full federal government is back up and running.
What Mike Johnson needs to do is he needs to bring the Republican House members back to Washington, D.C. He knows how to fix this. We need to negotiate. But to negotiate, they have to be here.
The House is done. The ball is now in the Senate's court. It does us no good to be here dithering on show votes. We did it. We sent the product over. It is clean. It is 24 pages in length. It's the most bare minimum that's necessary to keep the lights on for the people. And Chuck Schumer and 43 of his colleagues, Democrats, continue to do the wrong thing.
The effects of the shutdown are hitting America's airports as air traffic controller shortages trigger mass delays. The National News Desk, Andra El-Nashar, has the latest from Capitol Hill.
On the 8th day of the government shutdown, the Senate failed for the 6th time to pass a short-term budget. The impasse leaves federal workers without pay. It's believed to be behind an uptick in sick calls from air traffic controllers, who are already in short supply, often expected to work 10-hour days, 6 days a week.
Air traffic controllers are going to go to their primary job, but then they'll start having to take up a second job to ensure they have a steady stream of income.
Next week, air traffic controllers will receive their last partial paycheck until the government reopens. Working during the shutdown as an air traffic controller is made even more stressful by the fact that about 2,000 of their support staff are furloughed, burdening their already strained resources.
Unfortunately, this is the system that we have, critically understaffed with unreliable equipment.
So understaffed at some facilities that it doesn't take more than a couple sick calls to stifle the entire operation.
When there is a slowdown, a delay, or disruption in one part of the country, then there is a ripple effect, and it's going to affect the entire country.
CEO of the Flight Safety Foundation, Dr. Hassan Shahidi, expects delays to get worse heading into this weekend and next week.
I really hope that we don't get this dragging on into the holidays. That would be a disaster.
And this shutdown?
We've been here before. Ground stops and mass delays along the East Coast in 2019 helped pressure Congress and then President Trump to end the longest ever government shutdown of almost 35 full days, during which federal workers missed 2 paychecks. That's not the case this time around, at least not yet. Neither party is budging.
We're all here because President Trump has not come to the negotiating table.
This shutdown is nothing more than political cover for Chuck Schumer and the Democrats.
Now, as of now, Republican Senate leadership says they'll continue to hold votes on that same short-term budget that's already failed 6 times until Democrats change their minds. But there's no sign that will happen or that there will be any real negotiations between the parties.
Yeah, Audra, and what do we know about how the FAA is monitoring all of this, to make sure it's still safe to fly?
Yeah, totally valid concern. If you're, you've got a flight planned and you're hearing about all these shortages, you want to know that someone's keeping an eye on all of this. So the CEO of the Flight Safety Foundation explained to me that the FAA has this staffing threshold that absolutely cannot be breached. It's very strict. So the FAA monitors staffing at every single control tower, all airports. And once that threshold is hit, which frankly doesn't take much because of that pre-existing air traffic controller shortage, then the FAA will take action like slowing plane traffic or ordering a ground stop, which we saw happen in Nashville yesterday. And more ground stops are unfortunately expected the longer this lasts, the shutdown lasts.
In Washington, D.C., Atra Elnashar, thank you for that update. Well, an arrest has been made in connection to the most destructive blaze in Los Angeles history, the Palisades fire back in early January. Authorities say 29-year-old Jonathan Rinderknecht is suspected of maliciously setting that initial fire on New Year's Eve 2024 and even calling 911 to report it. The Palisades fire largely destroyed the Pacific Palisades and parts of Malibu, burned more than 6,800 homes and businesses, and killed 12 people.
Geolocation data for the 911 calls showed that he was standing above the fire in a clearing merely 30 feet from the blaze as it rapidly grew. Though homes and businesses cannot be rebuilt, this arrest, we hope, will provide a measure of justice to all those who were impacted.
According to the acting U.S. Attorney for Central California, who you just heard from, ChatGPT evidence helped investigators identify the suspect. Investigators say they obtained digital devices belonging to Rinderknecht that contained AI images he generated depicting burning a city and people fleeing. The final escapee from a New Orleans jailbreak 5 months ago has been captured. Derek Groves, seen here on your screen, was taken into custody earlier today in Atlanta, Georgia. Now, he was found hiding in a crawl space in the house. He appeared to be the only one in that home. Groves was among 10 inmates who escaped through a hole behind a toilet in the jail in May. All 9 others were taken into custody within 6 weeks of that breakout. Groves was waiting on sentencing for a murder conviction when he escaped in the spring. On the second day of the new term, Supreme Court justices heard arguments over a challenge to the deadline of counting mail-in ballots. It stems from an Illinois law that allows mail-in ballots to be counted up to 2 weeks after the election, as long as they're postmarked by Election Day. The lawsuit was brought by Illinois Republican Congressman Mike Bost, but there is a question over whether or not he had standing to sue. Bost won that particular election by a substantial margin, and the defendants say he didn't suffer an injury from the roll, something the liberal justices took note of.
Generally, we have said that suits should be brought by people for whom the harm is concrete in some meaningful way.
In every election, candidates voluntarily put themselves up for election, and there's a risk that they will win or lose, right?
Bost's lawsuit is one of several challenges to mail-in ballots brought by conservatives. A victory for Bost could pave the way for similar challenges in other states. It could also set the stage for the High Court's new term, which is full of voting rights disputes. Coming up, what President Trump hopes to accomplish in a possible Middle East trip as ceasefire talks continue in Cairo. Then cannabis crashes. A new report reveals the shocking amount of deadly wrecks that involve pot. Plus, new details about the bomb threat outside a D.C. church this week. What police found in the suspect's notebook. We're back in 90 seconds.
Our final negotiation, as you know, is with Hamas, and it seems to be going well, so we'll let you know. If that's the case, we'll be leaving probably on Sunday, maybe Saturday.
President Donald Trump announcing he is headed to the Middle East as early as Saturday night in the hopes that a final ceasefire deal will be accomplished, ending the 2-year war in the Middle East. Now, the peace talks in Cairo are in their 3rd day today, and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are in Cairo. They said they will not leave until the deal is done. Now, negotiators, we hear, are optimistic a deal could be reached within hours, and new details are out of England in other news here, new details out of England show London police say the Manchester synagogue attack suspect Jihad al-Shami called emergency dispatchers during the attack to pledge allegiance to the Islamic State terror organization. Now, al-Shami was shot and killed by responding officers after he rammed his car into congregants of the synagogue. He also is said to have stabbed some of them as well. 2 members of the congregation died, one of whom may have been shot by responding police. Tropical storm Jerry is turning towards the Leeward Islands. The National Hurricane Center said in its late morning update, Jerry could bring heavy rainfall to parts of the Leeward Islands, British Virgin Islands, and the U.S. Virgin Islands starting tomorrow into Saturday morning. Now, Jerry could become a hurricane by the weekend. We'll keep our eyes on it. Speaking of heavy rainfall, take a look at the streets of Louisville, Kentucky, and the surrounding areas that remain flooded after near record rainfall yesterday. Here's a look at some of that video of cars submerged in floodwaters about 15 miles outside of Louisville. Emergency crews rescued multiple people and continue to respond to water-related calls. The National Weather Service issued flash flood warnings for nearly 1 million people on Tuesday. Rainfall has now surpassed 4 inches in some areas. Well, as more states are legalizing marijuana use, new numbers show more drivers are dying from car crashes with THC in their system, the active ingredient in marijuana. The National News Desk, Angela Brown, is going through this new report.
In a sobering finding that may surprise some, researchers in Ohio analyzed more than 200 cases of drivers killed in crashes over 6 years. And here's what they found. Nearly 42% tested positive for active THC, the chemical in marijuana that gets you high. The study conducted in Ohio, which legalized recreational marijuana in 2023, is getting national attention. The CEO of Mothers Against Drunk Driving warns about the dangers of driving impaired.
What we hear from victims and survivors is just that 1 minute, that one moment, that one decision changed someone else's life forever, changed a family's life forever. We know that 2/3 of all Americans are impacted in some way by an impaired driving crash.
This report comes as the White House weighs whether to reclassify marijuana. President Donald Trump says he's still making up his mind.
Some people like it, some people hate it. Some people hate the whole concept of marijuana because if it does bad for the children, it does bad for people that are older than children. But we're looking at reclassification, and we'll make a determination over the next few weeks.
A separate study published by the NIH in 2024 found similar results. Over 1/3 of fatally injured drivers tested positive for cannabis, and those in states with legal recreational use were significantly more likely to test positive than drivers in states where it's still illegal. In Washington, D.C., I'm Angela Brown.
The more than 40 million people who rely on SNAP benefits for groceries are not sure when their meals will run out. SNAP benefits continue through October despite the government shutdown, but November is uncertain.
I am using them because I got laid off a few months ago. They are helpful. It's not a lot, but it all helps when you don't have an income.
A leader from the Montgomery County, Maryland Food Council is telling her clients to stay diligent and keep an eye on their SNAP cards. Well, Johnson & Johnson is ordered by a Los Angeles jury to pay $966 million to the family of a woman who died from mesothelioma. The jury found the company liable in its lawsuit, claiming its baby powder contained asbestos that caused the woman's cancer. Well, the company's vice president of litigation says it plans to appeal, calling the verdict egregious and unconstitutional. We have reporters all across the country and your neighborhoods covering the issues that matter to you. We are taking the pulse of America, and we start in Texas, where a mix-up about food orders led to a violent brawl.
What you're watching is difficult. Inside a Whataburger on Blanco Road. Punches thrown and shouting erupts on what should have been a quiet night, instead quickly turned violent. In the video are 4 young people, 2 just 18 and 2 20-year-olds. Police say this all started after a disagreement between 2 groups over a mix-up in food orders. 7 people ranging from 21 to 57 years old were taken to the Bexar County Jail and are now facing charges of assault causing bodily injury.
He's calling his survival a miracle from God. On Sunday morning, Chad McNair hydroplaned, flipping his car off the Bob Sykes Bridge.
It bounced up on the rail and teeter-tottered on the rail.
It was pouring rain. McNair was on his way to work at the Circle K convenience store on Pensacola Beach when he plummeted into the ocean.
I didn't see a way out. All my windows was up because it was raining very bad.
Desperate for oxygen and panic setting in, he swam to the back of his car. That's when McNair says God led him to the surface.
A supernatural feeling took over my body. It grabbed my arm and it led me to a place where I could escape that car.
I feel like we've regressed about 50 years.
Grace Resendez-McCaffrey drove from Pensacola to Mobile to see for herself. Mexicans depicted as skeletons being chased over a fence by more skeletons dressed as federal ICE agents on the front lawn of the sheriff of Mobile County. The sheriff has not spoken publicly about the display, but Tuesday afternoon his wife did, releasing this statement through an attorney. Every year I make tongue-in-cheek Halloween decorations with a topical theme at my home. I made this one playing both on my Cuban background and new needed changes in federal immigration enforcement. My parents were legal immigrants, and I have plenty of immigrants throughout my family.
Coming up, the startling number of Americans who say violence may be necessary to get the country back on track. Stay with us. A potential catastrophe avoided Sunday morning in Washington, D.C. as political violence threats continue to shake communities. The National News Desk, Kayla Gaskins, has the story from Washington.
Hours before the start of the annual Red Mass, a Catholic service celebrating the start of a new Supreme Court term, police arrested a New Jersey man with a tent full of explosives on the steps of St. Matthew's Cathedral. Several justices were expected to be in attendance that day. Court documents show the suspect's notebook had writings expressing animosity towards the Catholic Church, the Supreme Court justices, the Jewish faith, and U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
This was an intended hate crime to kill multiple people, including Supreme Court justices.
Some 200 explosive devices were found by authorities, bodies in the suspect's tent, including Molotov cocktails and vials containing methane.
Unfortunately, it's a continuation of a string of violence that has just kind of become normalized against Supreme Court justices.
The threat came days after a Biden-appointed judge sentenced the man who attempted to assassinate Justice Brett Kavanaugh in 2022 to just 8 years behind bars, much less than the 30 years to life prosecutors called for. As political violence concerns run high, worrying text messages from Democratic candidate for Virginia Attorney General Jay Jones resurfacing. In 2022, Jones writes about wanting a former Republican colleague, Todd Gilbert, to receive 2 bullets to the head and how he hopes Gilbert's children die because only when people feel pain personally do they move policy. Jones also writes how he thinks Gilbert and his wife are evil and breeding little fascists. Republicans now calling for Jones to drop out.
I can't imagine somebody running for this position and what it entails advocating for violence.
Democrats largely standing behind Jones, including Virginia Senator Tim Kaine.
Knowing this guy for 25 years, I'm still a supporter of Jay Jones.
An NPR PBS News poll out last week found more U.S. adults, 30%, now say Americans may have to resort to violence to get the country back on track. An 11-point increase from last year, driven mostly by Democrats. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins, reporting for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
Country music star Dolly Parton says she's okay, posting a video today to address rumors about her health after her sister asked for prayers last night.
I know lately everybody thinks that I am sicker than I am. Do I look sick to you? I'm working hard here. There's just a lot of rumors flying around, but I figured if you heard it from me, you'd know that.
I'm praying for you, Dolly, and I'm Taylor Murray. Thanks for watching.